Hello, and welcome to Reimagining Love. I'm Dr. Alexandra Solomon. I have been studying relationships for over 20 years as a couples therapist, a professor, an award-winning author, and as a wife, mother, daughter, sister, and friend. Now, I'm inviting you into this space each week as I dig into some of the toughest and most fascinating relational dilemmas of our time. If you want to discover how to create vibrant and loving relationships in your own life, you have come to the right place. This is Reimagining Love. Hi there. Welcome back. I'm glad that you are here today with me. We're doing another summer mailbag episode. I always love and appreciate your questions. So if you want to submit one, the link is in the show notes for all of our episodes. So just like we did last time, I'm going to answer 3 of your questions today. The first one is from a fellow Alexandra who lives in England, and she's struggling with her blended family. Then we're going to hear from a listener in Hawaii who's trying to make a difficult decision about the status of their relationship. And then finally, we will do a question from a listener in the UK who is ready to have a baby and her boyfriend is not ready. So let's dig in. I'm hoping that all of what I share is helpful to the listeners who submitted the questions. And of course, I hope that what I offer is helpful to you. Okay, question number 1. From Alexandra in England. Let's listen to her audio question.
Hi, Dr. Solomon. My name is Alexandra. I'd like to ask you a question about blended families and finding love later in life. So after a divorce, when both partners have children from previous relationships, children who may be young or who may indeed be adult, but are still very involved in their parents' life, what are some of the insights about how to blend families successfully, given the enormous potential for conflict in a sort of conflict of interest around resources such as time, prioritization, similar issues? So how do we deal with conflict in priorities between new partners and our children, or indeed between their children and ourselves? Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra, for reaching out. Of course, the first thing I want to say at the top is that your family, your partner, and all these kids of yours are really lucky to have you because you are asking the questions, right? You're asking the hard questions. You're acknowledging the messiness and the challenge. And that's a huge part of this. I want to just name and normalize that blending families is challenging. No matter what, the challenge is baked in. The challenge is how you know it's working. The challenge is not a sign of a problem. And the challenges take different forms at different stages. That is true. The couple comes together in time 1, and the first year presents challenges, year 5 presents challenges, year 10 presents challenges. So the changes change over time. But the challenges also are shaped by when in the family's life stage a couple comes together, whether a couple's coming together with little kids versus teens versus young adults. So that shapes the landscape of the challenges. And as some of you may know, I grew up in a blended family with divorces and remarriages that happened in the 1970s. So I was 3 when my parents divorced. And by the time I was 5, both my mom and my dad were remarried. Fun fact, my mom and my dad remarried a couple who was once married to each other. So that was an added layer of complexity. And we became a family of 4 siblings. So I have a full brother and I have a stepbrother and stepsister. We lost my stepbrother in 1995. And then we have a half brother. My dad and his wife went on to have another child in that marriage. So I know a lot about this topic. And my family blended when we were very young, right? So I have memories of sleeping on the floor next to my stepsister's crib. And actually, we don't ever refer to each other as stepsisters. And I'm sharing with you that context for 2 reasons. One, because it frames everything I'm going to say. I speak from that part of the lived experience. I've not lived through my own divorce, but I've lived through my parents' divorce. I've lived through divorces of siblings and friends, and obviously lots and lots of therapy clients. So I'm saying that to kind of frame where I'm coming in to this response. And I'm framing it also because I want to validate that our family, my family of origin, has been blended since the 70s. And I can still, at the ripe old age of 51, I can still feel the loyalty issues, the prioritization issues, the boundary issues decades and decades later. And that is certainly says something about my family system, but I think it also says something about the process of blending. In fact, I think part of where we get ourselves astray, you guys know I love to unpack the language that we use. I think that there's a problem with the language of blending. When I think about blending, I think about making a smoothie. And when you make a smoothie, you start off with a banana and some frozen mango and some frozen blueberries. But when you are done making your smoothie, you just have one monolithic drink, you know? I think that the process of bringing two families together is more like making a salad rather than a smoothie. You can make a kick-ass salad that is delicious, that like is totally satisfying and nutritious and gets the job done. But while you're looking at that salad, you can still see that that's a piece of lettuce and that's a tomato and that is a little bit of goat cheese and that's a slivered almond. Like you can still see the elements, but the elements come together to create something wonderful. So we ought to be thinking about these family systems more like integrated families rather than blended families, because I will tell you what, nearly 50 years later, you can still see the elements and the echoes of the original family systems that existed in my family of origin. And the presence of that doesn't mean something's wrong, right? We can't say that a smoothie is objectively better than a salad. They are different. So I don't think we should be judging families based on how blended they become, based on how much you can't tell anything about the origin story. We ought to be thinking about blended families more like salads, where they have come together and created something new and there's integration. And what's been created is different, but you can still see parts. Dan Siegel has my favorite image of what integration looks like and feels like. Dan Siegel is a fantastic neuropsychologist. He's been a guest on Reimagining Love. I'm a huge fan of all of his work. And the image that Dan Siegel uses for integration is the image of a choir singing Amazing Grace. And that when a choir is singing Amazing Grace, there are sets of voices that are holding different notes or carrying different parts of the song. And those voices are coming together to create something that is different from how the single voices would feel on their own. But there's distinctions. And he contrasts that with if you have a choir and the choir is singing, they're all singing the same note, right? That is our smoothie, right? If a choir is holding the same note, that is like a monolithic, uniform, sort of like one element. And he contrasts integration also with cacophony, right? If you had a choir just sing any old note, it doesn't make sense. It's chaotic. There's no theme. There's no kind of like subparts that are creating the whole. There's no intentionality. There's just chaos. That would be, for example, a salad made of things that don't make sense. I don't know, a rubber band plus, some chicken plus whatever, like just a chaotic thing that doesn't make any sense, right? So in between the single note and the cacophony is integration, where there are sub parts that are working together to create something beautiful. And that way, I like to talk with blended families. I'll keep using that word, even though I just said I would rather have a new word like integrated families. When I'm working with blending families, I talk about how it's like a business. It's like a business with different departments. And sometimes it's really important to have a whole business meeting. It's important for all the departments to come together and be together, create that kind of synergy that comes from us spending time as a whole. And sometimes you need to have department meetings. It's okay for the marketing department to get together and have an experience, and for the accounting department to come together and have an experience. And that doesn't make it less of a company. So can there still be subparts within this whole? And can that be okay? Can that just merely be a feature of this family? I was saying before that the challenges that a family system faces depend on what stage of life that family is in. And Alexandra, I think that your family is blending a bit later in life. My guess is you've got teens or young adults, but what I hear really clearly is that you are really close to the crew that you're bringing in, and that your partner is really close to the crew that they are bringing in. And that's beautiful. There's a lot of strength in that. And it just means that that's the context in which the two of you are blending. I think there's something really challenging about when a family blends early. There's a lot of intensity about parenting and different parenting styles, and who gets to discipline, and how do we connect, and all of that. But there's also a set of challenges that happen when a family blends later. I don't know how much the kids are going to ever feel truly like siblings, and could they just feel like really special friends in each other's lives? Could they feel like really special adults in each other's lives? And, the two of you have to tolerate kind of all of the ways in which your kids are finding points of connection or points of tension between them, and let that process emerge on its own timeline and in its own way. And I think sometimes the more parents try to orchestrate, the more resistance gets created. So can the two of you take your hands off the wheel, take some deep breaths, create the context in which connection can occur without pressure? I think sometimes the pressure creates a backlash. I will say that years ago, I went to a conference, the American Family Therapy Association, AFTA, and I sat in on a session with Dr. Constance Ahrens, who passed away in 2021 and was phenomenal around collaborative divorce, blended families, et cetera, et cetera. And she told stories about how when she is working with the family system, she gets the two power players in the room together, and that is the mom and the stepmom. And I was so tearful as I heard her describe this work. And this is, listen, it's super gendered. I think it's important to get dads and stepdads in the room together as well. But I think that for my own personal journey, I thought, oof, my whole life would have played out real differently if somebody had created opportunity for connection between my mom and my stepmom. So I'm thinking also, Alexandra, about the exes in the picture. And I know that it's not always possible for there to be collaboration and care between exes, but I guess I would want you, Alexandra, and your partner to just check in with yourselves. Is that possible? What's keeping it from being possible? Is there something that I am carrying about my ex, about my partner's ex, that is getting in the way of creating collaboration? Because I tell you what, when the couples can create collaboration and care and ease between them, it is like lifting a burden off the shoulder of the kids. And that's true whether the kids are 5 or 25. So if there's anything within your power, within your partner's power, that you can heal, release, let go of, vis-a-vis your ex, your partner's ex, that is a huge gift to your kids. And it will make all of the conversations about prioritization of time, of money, of attention, all of that, it will make those conversations easier if your kids can feel that there's some amount of fondness, maybe a stretch, but I'm going to say it, some amount of fondness and warmth and respect between the two of you and those exes and whoever maybe their new partners are. So what is the little wedge of compassion that you can open up for those exes? What is the wedge of curiosity that you can open up? What is the olive branch that you can extend? And know that you are doing that on behalf of the kids. Also on behalf of yourself, because carrying around old resentment is not good for any of our health. So I'm thinking about your question regarding prioritization of time, of money, of energy. And what is always the case is that we play out old dramas in very particular, concrete ways, like dollars, like minutes on the clock, like gifts, right? The things that become tangible, that become quantifiable, become the arenas where this stuff gets worked out. So think about an iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, right? You're getting like a bunch of pushback from one of the kids about something that has to do with where some upcoming holiday is going to be spent. And it feels like there's so much heat around that, like disproportionate heat. Okay, that is your little blinking indicator light to get curious about what's going on deeper. What's going on at deeper levels, at historic levels, right? What's the history that shapes the intensity of the response, of the emotion that your kid is bringing forward, that you're bringing forward, that your partner's bringing forward, right? When the thing itself feels small, but the emotional intensity feels big, that's telling us that something historic and old and unhealed is getting activated. Okay, fine. So in our best moments, we can start to see that as an opportunity to lean in, to tend to ourselves, to the other people. It's a gateway to a conversation that needs to be had. So let's imagine, Alexandra, that you and your partner are kind of dealing with one of these conversations where you've got a flare up in the family system about something, some vacation, some holiday, some visit, some financial investment. Can the two of you start your conversation in this way? I want you and your partner to start by anchoring in to what are our values as a couple. So probably you need to have a separate conversation about what are your values. I've got a whole values exercise in the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course because I think it's so important for couples to talk together about their values. There's something so beautiful about partners sitting shoulder to shoulder, looking together at these values cards. You download them, you print them, you cut them up, sort them out, values like loyalty, adventure, care, fairness, and you kind of deal them out and you look at them together and you come up with what are our top 5 values? What are the 5 values that we are saying are our compass north as a couple, as a team? Because if you know your values, then you run this decision through those values. And that's your best path forward. It's not going to be perfect, but it at least keeps you looking in the same direction. So I want you to anchor into your values, say out loud what your values are. And then I want the two of you also to say out loud some kind of mantra or affirmation or framing that might be something like, we are going to do the best we can in this situation. It might be something like, this is messy and this is ours. It might be something like, the one decision we make here does not have the power to define our whole family, right? Something that kind of orients you to, there's not going to be a perfect answer. You're always going to only be doing the best you can in this moment, and that this situation is yours. The pain or the complexity doesn't make it wrong. It is just proof that you're paying attention, that you're listening. And that's beautiful, because again, doesn't matter how old your kids are. Every single one of your kids was a tiny little baby in your arms, in one of your arms. And even though they're big, our kids always have the power to regress, and they will regress around stuff like this. And we can ask them to pull forward their most adult parts. And some of the reckoning of being a parent of adults is knowing that our kids were little. They were little. It's not ever an even playing field, We're not going toe to toe with somebody who is our equal. We are the parent, and we have to always kind of hold the responsibility that comes with that. When we held the other in our arms when they were like 8 pounds, then we've got a responsibility to kind of, keep our head above water, keep that big picture in mind. And there's always a little more responsibility on us than on our kids, I think. So then the other thing I want you guys to do in a moment of calm, when you guys aren't, dealing with a crisis of the week or crisis of the month, is I want you guys to make a map. Here's what I'm imagining. Alexandra, you and your partner have got a piece of paper for each member of the system. There's a piece of paper that says Alexandra on it. There's a piece of paper that has your partner's name on it. And there's a piece of paper for every one of the kids and actually for the exes. So every member of the family gets a piece of paper and you lay it all out. And on that piece of paper, you're listing the psychology of that person. And you're listing 3 elements. And these are the 3 elements that I really anchor into in my clinical work, in my personal life, and my teaching. What's the family of origin role? What's the wound or the enduring vulnerability? And what's the survival strategy? Role, wound, survival strategy. So for Alexandra, okay, so what's the role that Alexandra tends to play? And, if you need something about roles, we've got the Family of Origin Roles series here on the podcast. We have a Family of Origin Roles workbook. We have the Family of Origin Roles quiz. We're deep into Family of Origin roles here in my world because I think it's so important for each and every one of us to understand the role we played in our family of origin, how we tend to carry that into our marriages, how we tend to carry that into our parenting of our own kids. It tends to be pretty darn enduring. So let's say Alexandra was a perfect one. Okay, so that's the place that she's at risk of going. She's at risk of saying, it's all on me. I have to figure it out. The metric of success here is how everybody feels when this is all over with, da, da, da. So what's Alexandra's role? That goes on her little map. What's Alexandra's wound? What is her Achilles heel? What is the way that she tends to start to feel in a difficult moment? What's the way that she hates to feel? What's her wound? It might be something like, I'm being overlooked. I'm being rejected. I'm not being prioritized. I'm not being chosen. I'm being misunderstood. I'm being taken for granted. I am not safe here. Nobody's trusting me. Nobody's believing me, right? What is the way that Alexandra starts to tend to feel? What's the way that she's afraid to feel? And that probably is enduring and it probably comes up in a lot of different situations. What's she prone to start to feel in a difficult relational moment? Okay. And then what's her survival strategy? What does she start to do when that wound gets activated? And that tends to be one of 4 things, and they all start with F. These are our nervous system activation points: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? Does she get combative and argumentative and defensive and yes, but that's fight? Flight, does she avoid, retreat, run away? Does she freeze? Does she just kind of like go blank and shut down and feel completely overwhelmed and confused by what's happening? Does she fawn? Does she apologize for everything, blame it all on herself, say it's not a big deal, right? What is the place she tends to go? Okay, so that's Alexandra's map. Now you get out Alexandra's partner. What is their role? What was their role in their family of origin? Were they an easy one, a perfect one, a parentified child? What's their wound? What are they afraid to feel? What do they tend to feel in a difficult moment? Overlooked, disrespected, ignored, misunderstood, not chosen. And what is their survival strategy? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn. And then each and every one of the kids. And you might be guessing and hypothesizing, but this exercise, like this flexing of your empathic muscles and your kind of, you're developing insight into these people that you love so much. It's a beautiful exercise. It's a beautiful practice to try to really more deeply understand each and every one of these players. I also really want you guys to do this because it pushes against the tendency to pathologize any response, right? I think in a blended family, it's easy to be like, this is the troublemaker. This is the, this is a peacekeeper. It's easy to kind of just like cast people into roles or to pathologize, like, it's hardest with your daughter or, this son of our, whatever it is. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to be able to keep every player in their context to understand why their behavior makes sense, given their history, given the pain they carry, given this thing they're still trying to work out. Like, keep all the players in their context so that then their behavior makes sense. Their acting out behavior, their shutting down behavior, like it makes sense because, oh yeah, this is what this is what your son tends to do in situations like this. Then you're not surprised, then you're not befuddled. And then it kind of reorients you to, okay, so given that they're acting in that way, what's our next move? We can extend them an invitation and then let them just kind of figure it out on their own. We can, back up, let the action come to us. Whatever it is, whatever your next move is, then it's grounded in your understanding of who that person, who that family member is, what their struggle is, what they're still trying to work through and understand. It keeps an empathic bridge between the two of you and each of these players. And P.S., it keeps an empathic bridge, Alexandra, between you and your partner, right? Because if the two of you lose each other in this, whatever the crisis of the week is, if the two of you lose each other, then it's all downhill from there. So can the two of you keep a clear and empathic understanding of why this battle is hard for you, given your history, given the guilt that you still carry, given the grief that you still carry? How does your response to this battle make sense? Right? Keeping that empathic bridge between the two of you. And I want your partner to be able to do that for you, Alexandra, as well. Why does your reaction and your response make sense, right? For each of you, your perspective and your experience and your history shapes how you're meeting this moment. So I need each of you to make sense to yourselves. I need each of you to make sense to each other. And then from that shared understanding, you can look with curiosity and compassion and care at the reactions that whichever kid is having in whichever moment. Okay. I really appreciate you reaching out with that question. I have been wanting to talk more about blended families on the podcast and plan to do so in the future. So I hope that gives you a good place to start, a good place to go. And I love feedback. So let me know. Okay, let's move on to question 2. Question number 2 comes to us from an anonymous listener in Hawaii who also did not share pronouns, but they write, I am in a situationship. I feel a lot of love towards my situationship, but we are in a long distance relationship and she lives in the UK. She is a single mom and I've gone and visited, but it was a disaster in the dynamics with her daughter. We had good moments, but being in her house was chaotic and she didn't treat me the way I expected. And I didn't realize she really wasn't ready for me to be there. 3 months now, we still talk and she has made efforts to talk to me. And sometimes we video chat, but she wants me to move there. But it's hard being from Hawaii and not being able to figure out a visa route. I do not want to rush into a marriage visa because I'm also not sure about our relationship. I need a job and my profession is not listed on the skilled visa trade. I care about her deeply and she seems to want to try again, but I'm confused and breaking off the relationship would be heartbreaking. Very confused. Okay, listener in Hawaii, I'm going to start by just validating your pain. This is really painful and difficult. And I hear your heartbreak. I hear your disappointment. I hear your frustration. And I hear the very, very real wind in the face of this relationship. So let's talk it through. Okay, so first, what's really clear is that pain is inevitable. And I hate to sound like such a downer, but pain is inevitable. And so I wonder if part of your stuckness is that from a very lovely and admirable place inside of you, you are trying to find a pain-free way through this. So I guess what I want is for you to start from a place of radical acceptance that either path is going to hurt. Either path is going to hurt. Staying and trying to make this work is going to hurt. It's going to be challenging. And letting go of her is going to hurt. If you stay, you are making the choice to persist in the face of some very real obstacles. And if you decide to let each other go, then yeah, the heartbreak is real and you're going to feel it, and you're going to feel it for a while. And when somebody is stuck, one of the things I do want them to sit with is what are sort of the sneaky hidden benefits of the stuckness? All of our behavior serves some kind of a function. And I wonder if for you, even just in calling it a situationship, it's like you're neither too far in nor too far out. And I suspect that the stuckness that has very clearly taken on a life of its own is a way for you to protect yourself and to protect her from any additional pain. The in between hurts, but maybe there's a way in which your logic says that this hurt, the hurt of the liminality, is less than the hurt of the finality. And I also want to validate that you can keep going on like this. Situationships don't have an organic expiration date, right? So you are in a situationship, and every day that I always feel so mean when I make this point, but I make this point in order to remind you of your power, that every day that you choose the situationship is actually a day that you are choosing the situationship. You know what I mean? You are choosing to stay in. So even in that stuckness, you are choosing the stuckness. You are choosing the status quo. Choosing the status quo by allowing the status quo to continue is a choice. So I say that not to be a jerk, but really to point out that this too is a choice. So what I want to do next is kind of talk through the path of moving forward and then talk through the path of the breakup. I don't even know. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to weigh in on immigration and visa issues, but I do want to point out that if the two of you are able to find a way through those very real constraints and you do move there, and it sounds like maybe moving there does mean a marriage visa. So if you choose that, your concerns about her being a single mom are real. You will set foot in the UK and become a partner and a step parent in one fell swoop. And as we were exploring with the last question, blending a family takes time. And you will need to really just know that you're arriving in a land, literally a land, and then also like emotionally a land of this mother-daughter duo that has been there for a while. These two ladies have an established culture, and you're going to be the newbie, And so that would mean you really tolerating being an observer, being sort of one baby toe in the water and then a couple of toes in the water. It would be a meditation in patience, it would be a practice day in and day out of patience and observation and humility, knowing that there's an entire history between these two that started before you got there and that you probably will never be able to fully understand and appreciate. But boy, oh boy, there's something really beautiful about, just letting yourself go slow, being gracious, letting things take time, and knowing that the best that you can do is become a trusted and treasured attachment figure. That would really be, I think there's a really sacred place that I have seen lots of step parents play in the lives of young people. And that really is about being trusted, being treasured, having a lane that is all your own. And that this would be for you and her daughter to figure out as an evolution. And if you did move there, of course, my question for you to sit with is, can you move there without somehow her being indebted to you for your sacrifice? Can you feel the fullness of your choice? So this is your choice that you are doing, not as a rescue mission, not as a martyr move, but as a full choice to give this thing the best and perhaps only chance that it has. So that's a kind of reckoning I would want you to do, is how free can your conscience be? How deeply can you feel your choice? Okay. So obviously I'm not telling you the moves to make here, but that was me kind of highlighting some of what I want you to be paying attention to if you were to go ahead and build this relationship. Here's what I want to highlight in terms of just some reflections on what if this ends? What if you say, it's too much? I'm going to let this go, for everyone's sake. And Why is it hard? Why is it hard to end? Well, a bunch of reasons. For feelings, right? You have feelings for her. It sounds like the two of you have had some really meaningful conversations and connection, and there's lots of possibility in the air. So the feelings, it's hard because it's hard. It's hard because your heart wants what your heart wants. I will say, added to that is I think some of the most difficult breakups are when the constraints to the relationship are external to the dynamic itself. Here it's a combination of the challenges of blending a family, the geography, the visa. Those are constraints that are external to the relationship. You aren't saying to each other, I don't like, this personality trait of yours, or our values are misaligned, or you really have a temper, or there's been a pattern of betrayal that really disturbs me. Those are the kinds of challenges that are internal within the dynamic. What you're dealing with here are all these ways in which the external variables are making this relationship feel very nearly impossible. And as Jack Morin, who is a sex therapist, shared with us in 1995, he shared the erotic equation. Well, what's the erotic equation? Attraction plus obstacle equals excitement. And y'all have obstacles. So it makes sense that there's so much intensity and draw and pull, right? You are drawn to her anyways. And then you put obstacles like oceans and legality and children, all of this in between you. And it creates, ironically, perhaps more excitement, more intensity. It is the obstacles that kind of turn up the heat here. So I just want to validate for you that when it seems like the obstacles ought to be kind of turning the temperature down and saying, oh, this is hard, let's just give up. Strangely, the obstacles end up adding intensity. And I think with that, it can be easier with all that distance. It can be easier to idealize the relationship. She's pretty easy to keep on a pedestal in your mind. And I imagine that you're pretty easy to keep on a pedestal in her mind because you don't have the day in and day out of, who's making dinner tonight and whose socks are on the floor and why didn't you text me back and all of that. So there's probably some mutual idealization here that probably feels pretty good to both of you. I wonder what it's like for you to feel like a pretty idealizable version of yourself in this relationship. And that is true in all long distance relationships. And so I suspect it is certainly true in yours. And what the research tells us is that when long distance couples move in together, there's invariably a lot of conflict, and that the thing that we think we want, which is closeness and the daily interactions, ends up also being really hard. And so that kind of fall from grace, or that cognitive dissonance, like all I wanted to do is be with you, and now that you're here, you're driving me crazy. That's something that all couples who go from long distance to co-locating deal with. So at this stage of the game, it's real easy for you both to idealize each other and to feel idealized by the other. And the last thing I'll say about why might it be so hard to end is that we have a big ass cultural narrative that says that endings are failures. We, especially here in the US, we really elevate grit. Well, and I think also this is probably true for her as well. There's a lot of elevation of grit, sticking to hard things and persisting in the face of challenge. So you have that also kind of telling you that to let each other go is to give up, is to admit defeat in the face of obstacles. So I would invite you to notice when that cultural narrative is making a hard thing harder, and to know that, I always like to think about endings as completions. What was the purpose that each of you served in each other's lives? What did each of you bring to the other for this season, in this chapter? And that each of you would get to hold on to those awakenings, those insights, the ways in which you've accessed parts of yourself that maybe you'd lost sight of. You get to keep all of that. Even if the relationship ends, the lessons can remain. And that sounds a little woo-woo, but it's true. As I say, love doesn't leave you where it finds you. So you both are changed from this experience of the situationship, even if it ends. Ooh, I'm throwing a lot of quotes at you. I'm now going to quote my husband, Todd Solomon, who is fond of saying that it's really hard when the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing. That sucks. It sucks when the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing. And I'm not telling you that ending the relationship is the right thing, but it may be that is what serves both of you, is to let each other go with love. And if that is the case, the fact that it's hard to let go doesn't mean that's the wrong choice necessarily. As I imagine you holding on so tightly and trying to find a path forward, I guess I'm wondering who you're protecting. In what ways are you protecting yourself? And I wonder if you're protecting yourself from a self-critical narrative that somehow you didn't fight hard enough. You didn't fight for her. You didn't fight for this relationship. And if there's a self-critical narrative kind of hanging out in your psyche and your heart, what are the roots there? What's the origin story there? Is there an old story that you carry about somebody in your world who didn't fight hard enough for you? Somebody who let you go seemingly all too easily. So I wonder if there's a young part of you that feels like you need to fight this fight because nobody fought it for you. I wonder about ways in which holding on and fighting this hard is an attempt for you to protect her. And if so, what do you feel like you need to protect her from? And I have no idea if I'm way off base here, but I don't know. Does she believe that she needs you? And so if you let her go, does it feel like you're abandoning her? You're rejecting somebody who needs you? Because I guess I would invite you to look at the fact that clearly she doesn't need you because right now she doesn't have you. She's over there in the UK getting through day by day, bit by bit. And so if she believes she needs you, or if you believe that she needs you, that she can't get by on her own, I wonder if there's a little bit of a story there that's underestimating her resilience. And I am saying that not at all to devalue you and your place in her life, but I would invite you to be cautious about potentially buying into a story that minimizes her strengths. You know, she somehow figured it out before you, and that tells us that she would be able to figure it out without you. Not that she doesn't need love and appreciate you, but I don't know that she needs you. So if avoiding this letting go is a fear that you're somehow leaving her in a bad spot, I just invite you to to think a little more critically about that. I invite you to explore, who are you if this relationship ends? What do you fear that it says about you? And I wonder if you are the one that says, we gave it a good try. We really have appreciated the possibilities here, but it's too much. And I think that it's more than is doable. I wonder if there's a world in which that is merciful. If it's a mercy to be the one who says, we tried. As you maybe also have heard me say, clarity is not cruelty. If you get clear that this is too difficult, can that be clarity rather than cruelty? And then I was starting to say this before, but I really want to invite you, if there's a world in which you decide to let this go, could you end in a way that honors what you have given to each other, what you've shown each other, what you've brought out in each other? And could you reflect on who you've gotten to be in this relationship and what you've helped her remember about herself in this relationship? And then can each of you continue to live in such a way that blesses the connection, where you keep these gifts and you keep living these gifts and these insights in honor of the relationship rather than letting them go? Could that be a way that you honor who you were to each other and what you brought out in each other to continue to, live in a way that says like, thank you. Thank you for loving me during this time. So I hope there's something in there that's helpful. I hope it comes clear through, into your ears that I'm in no way minimizing how difficult this has got to be for you, and that I'm wishing both of you the best as you sit with some not very easy decisions. All right. Question 3 comes to us from Olivia. Olivia is in the UK. She uses she, her pronouns, and here's what she's got. How do you navigate conversations about when to have kids? I'm 35. My partner is 5 years younger than me. We've been together for a year, and I'm ready to start trying for children. He wants to wait. until life is more settled and consistent. All the elders in my life tell me that there will never will be a right time for children. My partner doesn't seem to understand that there are biological pressures for me. And he keeps citing stories of people having children at 40. I've made it clear that I'm not willing to wait for that long. I'm really scared of losing out on the chance to have children and don't want to waste my time if my partner isn't going to get ready. Would love any thoughts and advice on this, please. Thank you. Okay, Olivia. You and your boyfriend have a pace discrepancy, right? This is a pace discrepancy. And we've got in the show notes here links to pace discrepancy, episodes that we've done on reimagining love. And there's a worksheet, of course, because you know me and my worksheets to support the two of you navigating this pace discrepancy. And I'm naming that up top because what we have to do in a situation like this is avoid a story that sounds like this. Olivia is on a single-minded pressure campaign. Or Olivia's boyfriend is a commitment phobic, head in the clouds, dragging her along and not getting serious, right? Both of those stories are far too thin. You have a pace discrepancy. When the moment we call it a pace discrepancy, we create a space for the two of you to sit shoulder to shoulder and look together at the fact that one of you is more ready for something than the other one is. Okay, so take a breath with that. It's not surprising. In fact, what are the chances that two people are going to arrive at the exact same moment at the vision for the next milestone? And there's pain in both spots. It is real hard to be in the Olivia spot here, to be ready for the next thing and have a partner who's not ready. It's also no walk in the park to be Olivia's boyfriend, to look at your partner and see the disappointment and to see the anxiety and to figure out, how do I stay true to myself? How do I stay true to my partner, right? Neither of these roles is a walk in the park. We also know that in the space between Olivia's readiness and Olivia's boyfriend's lack of readiness, in that space, even if that space is an inch apart, it's loaded. And the more Olivia says now, the more the boyfriend says yes, but. And the more the boyfriend says yes, but, the more Olivia says now. And so in the space between their readiness is the energy of polarization. And we start to feel further and further and further apart. And we start to feel more and more afraid that we don't see the same things, that we don't want the same things, that we aren't understood, that we aren't appreciated, that we aren't loved, that we aren't chosen. So the pace discrepancy itself takes on a life of its own. And that's really important to remind you of, because it's not that one of you is doing something right and one of you is doing something wrong. It's there's this thing that is now living in the relationship that has the power to shape the conversations you're having and has the power to shape each of your perceptions of where the other is coming from. What I think is really encouraging here is, sometimes it's not a pace discrepancy. Sometimes it's a difference in relationship vision, right? One of you wants kids and one of you doesn't want kids. One of you wants monogamy and the other one doesn't want monogamy. One of you wants to live here and the other one wants to live there. The difference between Olivia and her boyfriend is not a difference in the actual relationship architecture. It's a difference in pacing. Because what I'm hearing from Olivia's report is he does want kids. He just wants to wait until life is more settled and consistent. Okay, so we can sort of check that box. These two are heading in the same direction. They just, their foot is on the accelerator somewhat differently. They're going at different speeds. I really want to make sure that we name that there are two identity variables here that are worth noting. And both of these identity variables are fueling the pace discrepancy. One is the age difference. It's real different to be 30 than it is to be 35. Just the psychology of 30, you've just left your 20s, shit's getting real, but it's not super real yet. And 35 is real, that difference, that age difference shapes the way these conversations go. Olivia's boyfriend is not yet feeling family life on the horizon because potentially he doesn't have friends who are getting married and having kids yet. He maybe doesn't have a sibling yet who has kids. So 30 is different than 35. So that's an age difference that, at other points in time isn't going to make a lick bit of difference. But right now, and around this topic of kids, I get that it's making a hard thing harder. And then the other one is gender. So gender and age are intersecting here because a 30-year-old man typically has a very different set of concerns than a 35-year-old woman. So age and gender are intersecting to make this harder. And listen, Olivia's boyfriend doesn't have a felt sense of the realities of the biological clock because patriarchy. Here goes me always blaming everything on patriarchy. We don't socialize boys and men to understand women's health, right? Menopause is having a moment now. There's a whole lot of husbands in the land who are learning for the first time ever that their wives are perimenopausal or menopausal, right? This has been like silent in the corner, even though millions of women have been going through menopause for a real, real long time. We shelter boys and men from understanding the realities of women's bodies, right? It's whispered tones, it's hushed tones, it's things that are shameful, things that are secret, things that can't be understood. So when Olivia talks to her boyfriend about the realities of the biological clock, this is like sinking in layers. Olivia has known about the realities of her biological clock for a long time, but this is relatively new for him. And I'm not making an excuse. He needs to get himself up to speed, but it's remedial, right? He's now getting remedial education on something that he ought to have been able to understand for a very, very long time. And I say that, Olivia, also to validate that you are not making up your concerns about your biological clock. Those concerns are real. And part of your boyfriend loving you is him understanding the realness of it, what it looks like, what it feels like for you to have a kind of time pressure that he, A, doesn't have, and B, hasn't been expected to understand. Okay, so we've talked about the polarization. The more you say time is ticking, the more he says, look at all these older parents, the more he says, everything's fine, we're going to be fine. The more you say, we're not fine, we're not fine. And the path out of this polarized conversation is to come at it from a different angle. And I'm going to talk to you about 4 different pathways that I want to invite you to walk down together in the hopes that it will shift how this knot is feeling to each of you. So I wonder about a conversation you could have about each of your current experiences right here, right now in this relationship. I would love, Olivia, for you to ask your boyfriend, what's it like for you to know that I'm ready to start trying to have a baby and to know that you aren't ready? How is that for you? And I want your boyfriend to ask you, Olivia, what's it like to be ready to move forward with trying to have a baby and to have me not be ready? How is that for you? And in that conversation about each of your experiences right here, right now, I want each of you to listen and notice if there's something that you hear from the other that you haven't yet heard before, if there's some new dimension that is added when you ask each other to open up a little bit about the experience of this pace discrepancy. And I want each of you to listen for any rise of empathy and compassion that comes up in you as you just notice what's difficult about the other person's position vis-a-vis this dilemma. So that's a conversation that's not about trying to change anything, but rather just trying to kind of walk around a little bit in the other guy's shoes, see how that feels. Because when we do that, it might have, it's like indirectly changing the whole experience through some empathy and compassion and curiosity about the other guy's perspective. The second pathway I want you guys to walk down is talking a little bit about fears, about the fears that you have, not about parenting, that we'll get to in a moment, but the fears rather that you each have about the impact of this pace discrepancy. So the question here is for each of you to talk to the other about what do you worry might be the toll that this pace discrepancy starts to take on our relationship. Just to talk about that. And then ask, when do you feel that fear the most? And when is that fear or that concern most quiet for you? So here you're talking a little bit about the worries you have about what living with this pace discrepancy might do to the relationship. And there, as you have that conversation, what I want you to be listening for is what's the overlap in your fears? The reason I want you guys to do that, to talk about your fears and to notice any areas of shared fear, is because that invites you to highlight and notice and take in the shared ground, the fact that there actually are some shared elements of this experience. We're both worried that this might drive us apart. We're both worried it's going to start to feel like we can't bring things up. And what we've loved so much about this relationship so far is that it feels safe to talk about anything, whatever it is, whatever it is. And then I want you also in this conversation about fears, I want you to notice how the fears or the worries or the concerns that each of you is carrying is in part a reflection of your protectiveness about the relationship and your love for each other, right? This is painful. It's painful to feel polarized. It's painful to feel misunderstood. It's painful to feel afraid of disappointing the other because we love each other so much, because there's so much we prize and cherish about this relationship. Pathway 3 that I want you guys to explore is I want you to really operationalize what ready looks like. So, what Olivia is reporting is that her boyfriend is saying that he will feel ready to have kids when you guys are settled and consistent. So, I want to know what that looks like. I really actually want him, especially, to paint a picture of what each of you is doing, feeling, saying, thinking in that vision of life when you are settled and consistent. Because I want you guys to both get clear on the delta, between what's happening right now and what this relationship looks and feels and sounds like when you are settled and consistent, right? I want a sense of like what's the vision? What are you guys moving towards? I also, in this part of the conversation, I want you guys to talk about ready enough. One of the things that happens around when a couple gets polarized is, the Olivia person is like, everything's fine right now. We could have a baby tomorrow and be fine. And the person in the boyfriend's role is like, no, everything has to be perfect. And every I has to be dotted and every T has to be crossed. So there's a polarization even around the vision. Either it's totally fine right now or it has to be 180 degrees from where it is now. And I doubt that's actually the case. I would suspect that there's a shared vision of what ready enough looks like. Is it around dollars in the bank? Is it around geography? Is it around career? Is it around emotional connectiveness? Is it around relationship with family and friends? Like, what does ready enough look like? What does settled enough look like? What does consistent enough look like? And this conversation, I think, can also be really illuminating because what I often find, especially with heterosexual couples, is that he may be locked in a story of being a provider that is shaped by our collective culture, maybe that is amplified also in his family of origin or maybe in your family of origin, that is not shared, that is in part a story or a vision that he's come up with all on his own, that it's all on him. He's got to be, at X point in his career, he's got to have this much money in the bank. Otherwise, he can't be a dad. He can't be a provider. That mantle of providing is real, real heavy for men. And what I often find is when a couple surfaces this part of the conversation, what she says is like, wait a minute, do you not remember all of what I'm bringing to the table and my money and my earning potential? And my love of career and we can come up with this together. It's not all on you. You are, in fact, making up a story about being a provider that I don't share. To me, we are co-providers and we are co-nurturers and we are co-caregivers. So if that's what's happening for him is a fear of letting you down, a fear that I can't be who you need me to be as a provider, if that's what's going on for him, of course he's not ready because that's really big and really heavy and really lonely. So can this part of the conversation surface something that then you guys can co-create a vision of providing, a vision of ready enough? Okay. And then my last pathway for you is to just talk about parenting. Talk about your hopes and fears about being a parent for each of you. What are your unique and specific hopes and fears about being a parent? And in this conversation, what's going to be especially important is for Olivia to name some of the fears she carries about being a parent, and for Olivia's boyfriend to name some of the hopes and excitement that he has about being a parent. Because what happens in a pace discrepancy is Olivia is outlining all the ways it's going to be incredible, and Olivia's boyfriend is outlining all the ways it's going to be stressful as heck, and it's going to be so much responsibility and so much stress, da da da. So in this conversation, can you each sort of speak to the other facet? Can Olivia speak to the fears and the concerns and the stressors? And can Olivia's boyfriend speak to the joy and the pleasure and the possibility and the excitement? Because that's also when you acknowledge that there's truth in both of those, because when it comes to parenting, there's a ton of truth in both the stress and the amazingness of it. So can you each kind of hold on to both of those sides rather than splitting the ambivalence, right? Olivia holding all of one, boyfriend holding all of the other. And then as part of that conversation, can you each talk about what you imagine are going to be the unique strengths that the other guy is going to bring into being a parent? Can Olivia talk about all of what she imagines is going to make her boyfriend an incredible dad? And can her boyfriend talk about all the things that he imagines will make Olivia an incredible mom? I wonder if some of what's going on for Olivia's boyfriend is he may carry some kind of quiet, kind of to this point yet to be verbalized fears about who he's going to be as a dad, maybe based on how he was parented or based on his own understanding of himself, his own self-confidence, his own stories of his worth, his worthiness, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be really helpful to get on the table, right? If part of his delay and concern is just some self-doubt, put that on the table, not for Olivia to fix or change, but just for Olivia to be curious about and empathic towards, and maybe when the boyfriend is ready to share what she sees, how she sees it a little bit differently, how she actually has quite a bit of faith and hope around who he would be as a dad. So, Olivia, I'm just thinking of you and hoping that that is helpful and really wanting you guys to move away from a conversation about when do you think you'll be ready and how much time, and I don't want to be a fool and I don't want to be a doormat, whatever, however this conversation has been going so far. I'm giving you some pathways to have different kinds of conversations that surface not just the fears and concerns, but also the hopes and the possibilities. And I hope that with some patience and some intentionality, the two of you can move more and more toward a same page that feels good to both of you, where there's pride in the patience and there's pride in the stretch. I want him to stretch and light a little bit of fire under his booty and see what he can do from his side to start to embody this vision of parenthood and fatherhood. And I want you to feel proud of ways that you're, practicing some patience as you guys find your way together. Okay, Reimagining Love listener, we covered some really interesting ground with these 3 questions. So thank you to our 3 listeners who shared their questions, their vulnerabilities, so that we can all learn together. And I hope that you, my listener, connected to these questions and that the responses I offered helped you think more deeply about how you can navigate all of the tricky relational knots in your life. We will be back with another mailbag episode later this summer. So if you want to submit a question, go ahead and follow the link in the show notes, and you can certainly remain anonymous if you'd like. All right, until next time, be well. Do you have a relationship question that you want answered on the show? Visit reimagininglove.com to send in a written or audio question. Questions can be about intimate partnerships, family relationships, friendships, you name it. If you're looking for more love and relationship content, you can find me on Instagram at dr.alexandra.solomon or visit my website, dralexandrasolomon.com, where you'll find my blog as well as the Intimate Relationships 101 e-course based off of the popular class I teach at Northwestern University. Thank you for listening, and see you next week here on Reimagining Love.